Welcome to TSRA-2A Ricochet. Your host is Andy Turner, the Legislative Director Podcast of the Texas State Rifle Association. We'll discuss your 2A rights, legislation, hunting, competition, you name it. Join in and be part of the discussion. Now here's your host, Andy Turner.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to TSRA-2A Ricochet. My guest again today is the fabulous Stephen Willeford, the barefoot defender, and what I would call the hero of Sutherland Springs, although there were many heroes. And Stephen, I want you to talk about those a little bit. Last week's show, we talked about what actually happened, what Stephen was doing, how he got involved. And he told the story. If you haven't seen that episode, I really would urge you to go back, watch that episode, and then come back here, because we're gonna talk about really the heroes and the aftermath and the law following Sutherland Springs, which was, and I believe to this date, is the largest church shooting in the state of Texas,
It is the largest mass shooting in the state of Texas and the largest faith-based shooting in the nation.
Wow. Well, at that point, I'm shutting up. Tell me, so now this is over and you are starting to think about things that have happened and who played roles. And I know that you expressed your admiration and appreciation for the police. And of course, we always appreciate what they do. But there were others that day that you felt should be called out as heroes. You want to tell us about some of them?
So within the church, the last people, and I talked about this on last week's episode, Julie Workman had been shot through the breast. And Chris Workman, her son, had been shot in the back.
Yeah.
And he was instantly paralyzed. And Julie, the shooter, then skipped one off the concrete into Julie's leg. And then he walked over and was pointing the pistol directly at Chris. And Chris thought his life was over. His point blank range, he pointed his pistol at Chris. And I yelled out. And the shooter came out shooting at me. And so that's what I talked about last week. But after the shooter had gone and left the church, Julie Workman looked over and saw a little girl that moments before had been swinging around her legs and singing praises to God. And she had been shot in the head and she was dead. And Julie was horrified and started screaming. And Gunny Macias, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant, and no one seems to really know Gunny's first name. They just call him Gunny.
Because that's what you do.
He had been shot 5 times in the abdomen. He couldn't even stand himself. And he barked out in a loud, booming voice, praise the Lord, even in this, praise God. And then he yelled at Julie, Julie, wake up. You were made for this moment. Julie's an emergency room nurse.
Oh.
And he said, none of this took God by surprise. You were made for this moment. We need your help. And Julie, bleeding from her own wounds, started tying tourniquets and saving lives within the church.
Wow.
And then a little girl was frightened. And so Gunny started singing Jesus Loves Me with her.
Oh.
Zach Poston. Zach Poston was a Marine in high school. A senior in high school. Zach Poston was a senior in high school. Zach Poston was already signed up to be a Marine in the delayed entry program.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he wanted to do with his life. And just before the shooter came to Zach, he took his foot and shoved a girl underneath a pew so the shooter didn't see her. And for his efforts, he got shot 7 times by the shooter. And Zach's grandmother crawled on top of Zach and sacrificed her own life and died on Zach. And Zach lived over it. And the Marines don't want Zach anymore because he's got pins and screws and plates holding his body together. And I personally think he's been battle tested. And he's still walking and talking. And Zach owes over $250,000 in back medical bills because of this, and has more surgeries in the works. Hank Barnett was the very first officer that was on the scene. And Hank is one of those people that just looks young forever. And my wife was talking about Hank one time, and she said he looks all of 12 years old. I said, oh, come on, baby, give him some credit. He looks at least 15. But Hank had been collecting trauma kits out of his own pocket and carrying them in his police cruiser for years. And people wondering why Hank was spending so much money on trauma kits. That day after he ran into the church ready to do battle with his own rifle, he was able to go out. When he found out the shooter was gone, he ran out to his car, opened up the trunk, and started distributing trauma kits. And Hank tied 4 tourniquets before he left the church to go to the crash scene. He tied 4 tourniquets before the EMS got there and saved lives within the church. There's so many people that need to be recognized in the church. Another story, David Colbath was shot 8 times. And the last time the shooter shot David Colbath, he put his foot in the middle of David's back and put the rifle muzzle down on David's spine between his shoulders and pulled the trigger. And the bullet went around David's spine, went between his lungs, came 2 centimeters from his heart, and clipped the sac around David's heart and lodged under his left arm. And David's still alive to talk about it today.
Wow.
There were so many miracles. The university hospital that I was a plumber at, that day was doing a mass shooting drill.
Wow.
Had every one of their staff, all the doctors and nurses on the site, and they were all complaining, why are we here when we could be having worship with our families and spending family time? Why are you doing a drill on a Sunday? And then the real call came out, and since they were all there, they were able to get all 20 ORs up and running before the first victim showed up.
And what did you say when we started this episode? God knew this was this. How did you put it?
Well, Gunny had yelled out to Julie, none of this took God by surprise.
That's it. None of this took God by surprise. And clearly he had a plan. And I'm not particularly, overly religious. I do have my beliefs and they are very strong. But if you needed evidence that God has a plan, there it is. And just
all 4 of the men that normally carried at that church did not, either they weren't there or they did not have their guns. So Frank was taking a black powder class in Oklahoma City so that he could train the kids in summer camp in primitive weapons. And so he was taking a black powder course to be able to get certified to train the kids to shoot during summer camp. And he was in Oklahoma City. He normally carried. He wasn't there. Rod Green, a former Army from Vietnam, normally carried at the church. It was the time where the time changed.
Right.
Date. And so he chose to feed his cattle before he was at church. So he showed up at church late that day, and he was after the shooting had taken place.
Wow.
Another man was late. He didn't have his gun. And the fourth and final one had sent his pistol with his wife. She was going on a trip. And he didn't want her to be unarmed on her trip, so he sent her his pistol with her. He did not have his gun. And it's almost like Satan said, today is the day. And God said, but you forgot about my servant Stephen.
And Gunny and others that you've mentioned, Julie and others. But yes, absolutely.
And Johnny, don't forget.
And Johnny, that's right. And Johnny with the longhorn on his throat, the driver, the guy that drove you into, well, literally harm's way. So I know that there were, is it 26 that were killed?
26 were murdered, 20 more were shot.
Injured.
There were only 49 people in that church that day. Do the math.
So really 26 and 20, so only 3 people got by without some sort of...
Without a bullet.
Okay. So, and I think it was important for you to express, not just calling out these folks for their heroism and their extraordinary efforts in the face of a horrific event, but the next part of this story is really after that day and what happened to the murderer, because I know you don't like to call him by name, but what happened to the murderer, and then what broke it, what happened just the other day. So if you can.
So I want to make it clear to people. So the Air Force has now been ordered to pay $230 million to the families. And all I can say about that is it's about time. It's about time. And for anyone that might think that this is about money, no, it's not about money. It's about the fact that Chris Workman will not be able to walk his daughter down the aisle and give her away when she gets married because he's in a wheelchair. It's about Ryland Ward that was shot 5 times. He's a 5-year-old little boy. He got shot 5 times. And they had to replace his hip and his femur and stuff with prosthetics. And he's running around like any other little 5-year-old boy. But that hip and femur will not grow with him. So he's going to have surgeries for the rest of his life until he quits growing. And the exact same thing happened to Zoe. And so it's almost duplicate.
And the medical bills just go on and on and on. But can you tell our viewers what the case was so that they understand exactly what went wrong with the system?
So the shooter and all these people that are wanting gun control realize we have laws already on the books that they don't enforce. And they want more laws that they're not going to enforce. They want laws, and it's never going to stop until they take the guns away from everybody, and then you won't be able to defend your community. The shooter was in the Air Force and previously. And the shooter, now it's going to get cold and hard. The shooter wanted his infant son to stop crying. So he took his puppy and dismembered his puppy alive in front of his son to get him to stop crying.
Oh, God. Okay, so
when that didn't happen, when the little boy would not stop crying, and why would he?
Right.
He beat him till he fractured his skull.
So the Air Force police pick him up and charge him with domestic violence.
With domestic violence, with cruelty to an animal, 2 felonies.
It was a felony. Was it reduced to a misdemeanor later? I thought I read.
He had several misdemeanors for choking his wife and stuff like that. But he spent 1.5 years in jail for those 2 felonies. So he had 2 felonies. He had several misdemeanors.
So he's a bad guy who now has a gun. How did that come to be?
Well, I'm going to finish off his record.
Okay.
So the military doesn't just boot you out when you commit felonies and you're in the military. Instead, they let you serve your time, and he served 1.5 years probably in Leavenworth, which is a military prison. I say that because he was in the military. And then afterward, they bring you before a panel to start working you through the system to discharge you.
Sure.
So after that, then they bring him before the panel, and he said, I'm going to go get my guns, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to shoot every one of you. I'm going to kill every one of you. He said that to the panel.
Now, what did the panel do?
They committed him to a mental institution.
Uh-huh.
And then he escaped from the mental institution.
Uh-huh.
And they finally gave him a dishonorable discharge.
Was it dishonorable or bad conduct?
Well, it's less than honorable discharge.
Yeah, because on the 4473 that he had to fill out at the time, I think, and Stephen, you correct me if I'm wrong here, because you know I'm all about it, but I think at the time it just said dishonorable.
Yeah. Well, anything other than honorable is to be considered dishonorable. Okay. And so here's the deal. When you fill out your little yellow form, right? Mm-hmm. The yellow form says if you have any felonies.
Right, which you did.
Which you had 2 felonies. The little yellow form says, have you ever been accused of domestic violence? One of his felonies, domestic violence. Little yellow form says, have you ever had mental issues? He was entered into a mental institution. And I just passed right by the terroristic threats that he made to his superior officers. And then he escaped from the mental institution, and the form says, have you ever had other than honorable discharge from the United States military?
Okay. I thought it said at that time back in 2017, dishonorable, but that's my mistake.
Other than honorable discharge from the United States military. So, he lied on every one of those, and that should have been triggered another felony for falsifying a government document. But the Air Force didn't enter any of his record into the instant background, the NICS system, National Instant Background Check
system. Yeah, it's the thing that for if there's anybody watching this show that's never bought a gun, when you buy a gun in Texas, you fill out the form, and assuming you are a lawfully abiding citizen, they run your background. 10 minutes later, you're good to go.
That NICS system was set up to keep someone from, like himself, from buying a gun.
But the Air Force didn't report what they knew, and we're not talking about a single record. This guy had multiple things on his record. So, or I should say, a single charge. He had multiple convictions.
Almost everything that's asked on that yellow form that you fill out for your gun, he lied about. Almost everything he could have checked off, and he never would have been able to buy a gun had they entered any of that into the system.
But it's the law. And what do you mean?
And it's also the law that they have to enter into the system.
I'm saying it's been the law since 1996. And, and it was the law then. And so the families and the victims of this heinous individual, how's that? For want of a different description.
I have different descriptions, but I'm not allowed to say them on this.
Please don't. Not that I disagree with you. So they got together. You sort of made some connections with them with some legal help, and a lawsuit ensued. And who was sued?
The Air Force was sued.
Okay.
And because they did not enter anything into that. And
what was their defense? Do you remember?
okay, it goes all the way back to the assault weapons ban and when the NICS system was set up. And this is where I kind of came in and helped as I could, is when the NICS system was set up, Congress realized that if you could sue the person that is in charge of entering this data into the NICS system, human beings make mistakes. So if you could sue that human being, then they would never find anyone that could fill that job. And so they wanted to make an exception that you could not sue that person. So when it was being heard and stuff, they wanted to make it where that person couldn't be sued for not entering into the system. And then the NRA and Chuck Schumer, for the very first time, probably stood on the same thing and saying, no, you can't make it where the government can't be sued. You may make it. They put it into the bill so the individual bit couldn't be sued. But they didn't want it to be allow the government to get away with it.
Right.
So what they did is, and they even said, stood on and that's the first time the NRA lawyers and Chuck Schumer had an agreement. I truly believe, and they said this exempts the individual from being sued, but not the government.
Okay.
And so fast forward, the DOJ said, no, we are all exempt because of the assault weapons ban and the NICS system, and we're all exempt. So the lawyers for the families were having some issues trying to get confirmation. And so the NRA, I contacted them, and through channels, they connected the dots with the general counsel of the NRA.
Yes.
So that the NRA lawyers could actually say, hey, look, this did happen.
Right.
And this law does not exempt the federal government.
And so the other day, we just got a ruling in this case, right?
The other day, the courts have ordered the Air Force to pay $230 million to the families.
Which is going to go a long way to paying some of those medical bills.
Well, again, Chris Workman needs a handicap accessible home. And we have worked to that.
And
now he will be able to get his handicap accessible home. Again, we talked about medical bills from a little 5-year-old boy that had been shot multiple times, and he'll have medical bills until he quits growing, and probably beyond that. Or a little 7-year-old girl that got shot like 4 times. Or David Colbath that I talked about had been shot 8 times. David Colbath is suffering from lead poisoning, from the splattered lead within his system is causing him to have short-term memory loss. Or Morgan Workman that got shot 3 times in the leg, and they can't recover those bullets. They can't take them out because they just went everywhere. And she has been suffering from, and for a very long time, she had to walk with braces on both her legs, not just one, not one that she was shot in, but both her legs, because the lead poisoning was affecting her where she couldn't walk without braces. We're talking about people with that have lost, John Holcomb that lost his pregnant wife and 2 of his children, and his wife covered his youngest daughter and sacrificed her life to save her youngest daughter. And John Holcomb lost those family members, and the Holcomb family lost 8 family members altogether in that shooting.
So, have you talked to any of the families in the wake after the court hearing?
I have.
And without quoting anybody specifically, what's the general feeling?
I really can't discuss that.
Okay, that's fine.
And
That's
a lot
fine.
of it is personal, and I don't want to. I
didn't know if they were just
their
general feeling some sense of relief or.
Well, obviously, it's some sense of relief, but understand also that this 230 million is going to be divided between them, and some people are going to get less, and some people are going to get more, and the lawyers are going to get probably 25% of all of it. You know, and that's just the nature of things, and there's other bills that have to be paid and stuff. So
do you think this is the end of the story, or do you think there will be, stay tuned and see if there is more legally going to happen down the line? I'm not asking you to comment on what that might be, but
I hope, and I would encourage all of your viewers to call their congressman, their state and their federal congressman, whether it's House or Senate, and say, finish it, settle it, be done. It's the Air Force's fault, and that is a very obvious thing.
And I would say, call you, U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, absolutely. They would have the ability to put pressure on DOD to make sure that something like this never happens again. Because DOD is the one that sets the policy for the Air Force and the Marines and the armed forces in general. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
And if anybody's got any trouble finding out who that is, let me know. You can reach me at andyturner@tsra.com. I'm happy to look that information up for you. I'm hoping they have the sense not to drag it on any farther. Yeah, I hope so too. Is there we're just about out of time. Is there anything else you want to tell people?
Well, I want to say that first, they tell me that only 10% of people would do what I did. I like to believe that it is a higher percentage than 10%. And I like to tell people, and I'm not the originator of this saying, but they say that the body can never go where the mind has never been. So it's time to start thinking about taking action. And would you take action and decide to take action? And if we can bring that 10% up to 20% and double the people, you are your own first responder. It's time for you to go out, carry a gun, but not only just go out and carry a gun, but get trained. Because if you do not get trained, they say in the shooting at the Walmart in El Paso, there were 8 concealed carry permit holders with their guns in that Walmart. None of them chose to confront the shooter. Instead, they chose to get their families out, and I don't blame them for that. I think that is great. They got their families out safely. But as for someone that has taken a little training, because you will follow what your training tells you to do and what you have decided in your mind to do, the best thing would be to tell your family, leave, get out of here, leave, go that door. Don't worry about me. I'm going to occupy him. And if I can save my family and possibly your family also, that's the mindset we need to have as gun owners. We need to be trained. We need to do the right thing at the right moment. And we need to have the ability, because I'm going to tell you there's things worse than dying in life. And one of the things worse than dying in life is to know that you pulled the trigger intending on taking out a bad guy, missed him, and someone innocent now has to pay for the bullet that you shot. So training is key here.
Yep.
I don't believe you should have to have a bunch of training to carry a gun. Don't make that mistake. But if you are going to confront an active shooter, You need
better know what you're doing.
you need a little higher ability than just your average Joe.
So I think I would say in conclusion, I am not, and neither, and I know this is not what you're saying either. Neither of us, and I'm sure nobody watching this program would want to make a decision for what an LTC holder or someone lawfully carrying a gun in, say, Walmart or wherever should do for their family, whether they need to escort them out, because like I hear a little person in your room there. And so perhaps if it was you and the little person, you'd want to go out, with the little person, make sure they're safe. And then you can make certain decisions. And in other cases, my little person is 20 years old. So if there was a clear shot for her to get out the door, I might make a different set of, but I would never judge anybody. And I know you don't either.
Well, I'm not either. I said it was honorable that those.
No, yes, you did. I absolutely
got the family out safely.
Yep.
But as for me, and as a sheepdog, if you will, we are wired a little bit different.
Yeah,
we're protectors. Our law enforcement, for the most part, are sheepdogs. They're protectors. They're people that would put their lives on the line for innocence. Yep. And if you choose to be a sheepdog, if you choose to be a protector, then you need a little extra training and better ability than the person that would just carry a gun to protect their families.
And to that end, all over the state, there are really great what we call tactical instructors. If you cannot find one, I would say go to wherever you buy your guns. The guy at the counter that you trust. Talk to your buddy that you go to the range with, but get a referral from somebody.
The best thing I can say is find a reputable range, and ask them. Chances are they would know someone.
They would know somebody reputable. Yeah, you don't want to just Google it and go to some guy or go to some girl, because not all instructors are created equal. So you want the good one. So there are ways to do that. If anybody wants tactical training and they don't have access, or they don't know, again, email me. If I can't find one, I'll call Stephen.
I could tell you something.
I've got, we had Carl Wren on previous episodes. If you're not living anywhere where Stephen and I are living, I'm sure we've got,
Andy, your predecessor, Mike Cox, is an excellent instructor.
There you go. So there's a number of, I don't even want to put a number on it, but anyway, there's ways, and training, safety. This is at the heart of everything TSRA does. This is at the heart of everything that Stephen Willeford, even though I didn't put his shoes on.
Shoes aren't necessary for proper firearm.
No, but they're helpful. They're helpful.
They are helpful.
So
when time sensitive, they don't matter.
Right. So I want to thank you for sharing your story and sharing the outcome of the court case, because that's not breaking news by the time this airs, but it is very recent and timely news. And I would like to say congratulations to the plaintiffs in this case, but it seems
inadequate.
Doesn't seem appropriate. I'm glad they won, but
it's inadequate.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. So I'm happy they got somewhere. I hope that I hope that the Air Force or Department of Defense, I don't know who writes the check, but they just need to write the check and let these people get on with their lives. So, but anyway, Stephen Willeford, the barefoot defender from Sutherland Springs, thank you very much for joining us on TSRA 2A Ricochet. One day I'll stop tripping over my tongue. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you. It'll be a couple weeks. I'm taking a small hiatus until after the elections. Whatever you do, and Stephen's mentioned this several times, it is important for you to vote, whether it's an issue like this or an issue of constitutional grounds. You need to vote. Voting is voting day. Primary voting day is March 1st. We have all of our endorsements and grades up on the TSRA-PAC page. If your district isn't listed there, it's because there's nobody running against the incumbent. So don't worry about it. But do check it out and show up and vote, because I know it seems like a long connection between the story that Stephen just told and showing up and voting. But believe me, without proper laws allowing us and protecting us when we protect ourselves and others, we got nothing. So if you don't put the right legislators in there, I want to
put a shameless plug in here too. I have a YouTube channel.
Right. Go ahead.
You can go to YouTube and run a search for Barefoot Defender. And please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell, because it matters. And also, I have a website, thebarefootdefender.com. So you can come to my website. You can see what I'm doing. I'm going to be speaking in Phoenix, Arizona at the Capitol on the 19th. I'm going to be speaking in Iowa at the Capitol on the 24th.
Right after my birthday.
And then Atlanta, Georgia after that.
Okay. So, and actually, we'll have you back on the show to talk more about the aftermath of the aftermath, like what you've been doing, for advocacy and things like that. We'll talk about that more in future episodes of Two-Way Ricochet. But again, thank you very much for taking the time and being there for everybody, and being not just being on the scene, but being so supportive. I know you worked with this community a great deal, and they are your community. They're your friends and your neighbors and your loved ones. And thanks for everything, and especially thanks for taking the time today. I know that with the little one there and home and all of that, you're quite busy, but I want to thank you. And will you join us again on a future episode?
Absolutely, and probably we'll see you at the NRA convention.
Yeah, well, the TSRA annual general meeting's coming up on March 4th. So, here in Bastrop. So if you'd like to come, I'm sure there's a whole lot of people that would love to see you.
Send me all the information.
I will. But it is up on our webpage. So anyway, with that, I'm going to let everybody go, and we're going to take a brief hiatus for a couple of weeks and try to do some things with technology and get a little better at this. And that's it for now. I will send out an email when there's another episode dropping, but don't, make sure you're checking the box on our YouTube channel, our TSRA-PAC YouTube channel. And I'll see you soon. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.
You've been listening to TSRA Two-Way Ricochet with your host, Andy Turner, the Legislative Director Podcast of the Texas State Rifle Association. And until next time, you can find out more at TSRA-PAC.com and TSRA.com.